the class anymore. And
So
that
you were 14.
I was 14 at the time. I really didn't understand how my friends called me dirty Jews right away. I did not understand how I was clean yesterday and today I'm dirty. I really didn't understand. For 2 years it was miserable. They beat us up. My father, who was a rabbi with a beard, couldn't go out on the streets because whenever he went out, they were tearing on his beard until blood was coming out. And this was going on for 2 years.
Mom,
Yes.
tell them about before.
Yeah. Before that, I had a wonderful childhood, loving parents.
What were their names?
The name in Jewish Moshe and Friday, Fanny and Morris. And they were very good to me, loving. And I had wonderful friends until the Nazis came in.
About when you were a tomboy
Yeah.
and your mother following you.
Yes, I was I was a tomboy, believe it or not. But yeah, and I used to go like to the theater with my friends. And my mother used to say, well, that's okay, go ahead, no problem. But I didn't know until I realized that she was hiding in the gates and by every house. She was watching over me. That's kind of a childhood I had. Wonderful parents.
But also, I wanted just to point out that she was extremely sheltered. She led a very sheltered life, was very naive, but in some ways I think it helped her through the horrors that were to come.
Anyways, after, okay, can you hear me? Yeah. After 2 years suffering and being beaten up by your friends, the Nazis decided to take us into a ghetto. They made a fence of 4 streets, a square. But before they put us in the ghetto, they took us to the main synagogue in the town. They told us to take our quilts and our pillows in one suitcase with our clothes. Then we got into the synagogue. They took away our quilts and pillows and they cut it open. The synagogue became like a snowstorm with all the feathers. It was very traumatic for
What
me.
was in that suitcase?
In the suitcase, only one pair of clothing, and that's all they could take.
Wasn't that dress in there?
Yeah, there was a dress that it was in a style at that time,
Maybe.
a navy dress that we couldn't really afford, but my mother sewed up her only dress that she had that was a little fancy, and she made me a navy dress. And that's what I was taking with me, the only thing. But of course, by the time we got into the ghetto, they took everything away from us. We were in the ghetto for 6 weeks.
What did you do there?
They made us, they tortured us. They made us work, clean the street, that it wasn't even dirty, but they just wanted to see us work. We had no food, hardly any food, no water, and it was
What
a
was the house like?
The house, actually, the house they put us in was right across from the house that we lived. We were watching the neighbors just take whatever we had, but that was the neighbors from the right. The neighbor from the left risked his life to call out my father's name in the middle of the night so he could throw him a piece of bread. If he would have been caught, he would have been shot right away. But he risked his life for us. Anyways, after 6 weeks in the ghetto, they took us to the train station in town and put us into cattle cars that was like 500 people in one car. We just had standing room if somebody died on the way because we had no food or water. We had to hold him up because there was no room for him to fall down. Okay. Anyways, after quite a few days, I'm just guessing, maybe 5-6 days, we got off the train at Auschwitz. Right away, they took my father to the right, which later I find out, straight to the gas chambers. I was still holding hands with my mom very strongly till a Nazi came in, tore our hands apart, threw my mom to the right, and took me into the barracks. And it was torture every day. We had to stay in line, 5 women in one line, every day, twice a day, morning and night, until we were all counted in Auschwitz. And of course, many of us couldn't take the torture anymore. They went to the electric barbed wire and hung themselves. But by the time the Nazis found them, we had to stay in line, whether thunder or lightning or sun had beat up on us. We just had to stay for hours and hours until everybody was found.
So if you can imagine yourself, I noticed a lot of teenagers come in. So try to imagine yourself, you're 16 years old, you have lived a very sheltered life, you get off of a train, and it's the very last time you see your parents, you're 60. And it's a very difficult picture to paint for yourself. But I think until you are able to, you can't really appreciate what happened back there. 6 million. 6 million died. I don't know how many millions survived. But the one thing that the survivors shared was a miracle. Any survivor that you talk to will tell you about their miracle. So Mom is now in Auschwitz for how long?
In Auschwitz for 3.5 months, being tortured every day. We had to kneel on the rocks until blood was coming out. And if the couples felt like just beating us up, just for fun, we had to endure that. And we had to wait. We couldn't go to the bathroom when we needed to go. Then they decided we can go. For weeks sometimes, and it was terrible. And sometimes we even made it in the bunk beds, and we had to lay on it. And it was a very, very sad situation. When we were standing in line, Dr. Mengele, if anyone knows,
Is there
about him.
anyone here who doesn't know who Dr. Menwin was?
He was the angel of death. He used to come every day and walking the lines, and whomever he felt wants to take away, whether to the gas chambers or to for experience, he just took them away. One day, you see, I was standing in line with 4 of my friends from my hometown. The youngest was my best friend. Her name was Rojiko. And as we were standing in line, Mengele comes to our line, and he had this horrible silver cane that whomever he wanted to take out, he just pointed with his cane. And one day he stood in line, in front of my line, and he pointed his cane, which looked to me, he's pointing it at me. So I got out of the line. And he took that incredible silver cane, pushed it into my belly button, and pushed me back into the lane. I still feel, up till today when I have nightmares, that belly button, that cane in my belly button. And he took out my best friend and took her away. When we got back into the barracks, that mean couple calls out, is there anyone that has family that was taken away? The 3 sisters says, well, our little sister was taken away. And this couple with this mean voice, and her finger points to the gas chambers and says, you see, yeah, to the smoke, and says, you see the smoke? That's where your sister is. Up till today, I have guilt feelings because I thought I was supposed to be there. And we were in the barracks for 3.5 months when they decided to take women to labor camps. I befriended a very good woman 2 years older than I in the barrack, actually in my bunk bed. And when they were selecting the woman, they put an incredible heavy barrier towards the door, because the doors had no barracks. And excuse me, the barracks had no doors. You have to forgive a woman 95. Anyways, they put the heavy barrier, and whomever they looked at and they felt they can go to war, they pushed her in. And whomever not, they pushed her away, which later I find out straight to the gas chamber. They pushed we called each other sisters already. Her name was Helen. And they pushed her into the barrack, and they pushed me away. So I was standing there and crying. Now I lost my so-called sister again. When all of a sudden, this incredible heavy barrier fell over, and I snuck into the barracks. And this is why I don't have a tattoo, because I wasn't supposed to be here. But God had other plans for me. I believe in God very, very strongly. I'm not very religious anymore, but I believe in God very, very strongly. God made sure that that heavy barrier fell over, and I snuck in. But by the time I snuck in, my so-called sister was taken away to a different camp, and I went to a different labor camp. It was called Fallersleben. And it was a little bit better living. They gave us a little more food. They wanted to make sure that we are able to work. And we were there for 9.5 months, working very, very hard, 12 hours a day. Every 2 weeks we worked 24 hours because the shift changed. So I don't have any fingerprints anymore because many times I soldered the handles to the mines with my fingers soldered in, so I have no fingerprints. Anyways, we worked very hard there for 9.5 months until the American soldiers were coming a little forward, and so the Germans decided to take us what they called a death march, because many of us died on the way. No food, no water, walking and walking day and night, until we wound up in another camp. It was called Salzwedel. They locked us in, and this is where I found my so-called sister. She also worked in an ammunition factory, like me. Her name was Helen. We were very, very happy. But the Nazis shut the gate and ran off because they saw that the Americans are getting closer. So after 2 weeks, all of a sudden these American soldiers came, shut open the gate and said, "You are free." But of course we didn't understand a word until they found us a Jewish soldier and told us in Jewish, "You are free, go into town, take whatever you like." But I went to town, I didn't want anything. I thought I'm gonna go home, find everything, my parents. But I picked up a big, big jar of honey. Yeah, my daughter says every time I speak, the jar gets bigger. Anyways, by the time I got back to the camp, I licked it all up with my fingers. By the time I got back to the camp, I was deadly ill. The soldiers took me into the infirmary for about 4 weeks, and they called me the honey girl. I didn't know it. I was out. I was...
Should I tell them the rest for you now, or what?
You can tell them now.
As I've said before, miracles were very involved in survivors. So, my granddaughter is almost 18. So this happened 16 years ago. She was 2. And my daughter had convinced me to go out and watch a 4th of July firework display with my husband. And the 4 of us went. And this little 2-year-old is sitting in a stroller, and she is so moved by the patriotism that was in the air, by the songs, by the lights, it touched her. And this 2-year-old is sitting there, and she's got tears running down her face. She doesn't need to be changed. She's not hungry. She's moved. So I can't wait to tell my mother the story the next morning when I talk to her on the phone, because She was living in Phoenix, and I spoke to her every morning. And I tell her the story, and she says, Rachel, did I ever tell you about my first 4th of July? I said, no. Well, her first 4th of July, the American soldiers liberated them on April the 14th, 1945, and they stayed till the end of September to nurse these people back to health. They stayed the whole time. On the 4th of July, of course, being American, they had a big celebration with fireworks and beer and singing and just a regular old 4th of July party like we've all been to. And Mom says to me, they couldn't understand one word that was being said, but that she was moved to tears. She said she had tears running down her face for no reason other than feeling emotional over our celebration. So, of course, I'm crying now. And she says, and if I were ever to meet one of those soldiers, I would be so happy. Oh, I get off the phone with her and I start investigating to see if there was a possibility. Max Lieber was in the 84th Infantry, and I knew that it was the 84th that had liberated my mother's camp. So I went online and I found that they were going to be having a reunion in the Midwest, and there was a contact number, so I called, and the guy says, you know what, I hate to disappoint you, but there really aren't very many soldiers in the 84th left from World War II. He said, it starts at 18 and goes up. So I said, may I write a letter and would you post it for me? He said, absolutely. And that's what I did. I sent a letter. About a month later, on a Sunday morning, the phone rings, and my husband's in the bathroom shaving, and I answer the phone, and this guy says, hi, my name is Max Lieber. You don't know me, but you sent a letter, and that's about as far as he got before I just froze. I actually found a soldier that liberated Mom's camp. I had my husband take the rest of the phone call. Anyway, so Mom lived in Phoenix, Max Lieber lived in New Mexico. Could not wait to jump in the car and come meet her. We became fast friends, needless to say. We would go to New Mexico, he would come to Phoenix. And we did it quite often. And when we went to New Mexico this one time, Max always loved to have people in to meet Mom. And so it was, full house as usual. All of a sudden, Max is looking at Mom, and he says to her, Esther, do you like honey? And she says, not anymore. And he said, I know why. You're the honey girl. That's when she found out that that's what they had nicknamed her.
So now I was liberated, and thank God the soldiers, the American soldiers, brought us back to health. We were like skeletons when they liberated us. So in September of 1945, they decided to send us home. Actually, they were waiting until like the Czechoslovakians or the Hungarians will take us home. Just so happens that the Czechoslovakians took their Jewish people home first. And on my birth certificate, I'm Czechoslovakian, so they took me on a ship to Prague. From Prague, we got on a train towards Budapest. But in Budapest, I had to get off the train to take another train to my hometown. And the only cousin that survived of a family of 35 people was liberated first And he came to the train station every day to see who's coming home. And I got off the station. He was very, very happy to see me. But he says, Esther, no use for you to go home. Nobody survived. And the Russians even took over your house. So you have nowhere to go. But we have an uncle in Israel, which was Palestine then. And so I have a good friend in an organization, kibbutz, and I'll take you there. I'll introduce you to him. He's taking orphans towards Palestine. And he will take you with him and help you find our uncle. I said, okay. And he introduces me to him. And we're talking. You know, at those times, where are you from? Where are you from? So he asks me where I'm from. And I tell him the name of the town. He says, I had a great uncle there. I says, who was your great uncle? And then he tells me the name. I was in awe. I fell in love with him. His name, he was the Sapinker rabbi. And he lived in my hometown. And when I heard who his great uncle was, I was in awe of him. I was thinking, if my parents would know whom I befriended, how happy they would be. And we became very good friends. Before he took 60 orphans towards Palestine. He was 23 years old, and he took upon himself to take all those orphans to Palestine. Yeah, we were going, walking and going however we could towards Palestine, and whoever could take us in for the night, we were happy. We wound up one night in a monastery. The nuns were very happy to take us in, feed us. For a couple of weeks we stayed at the monastery. But when they gave us food, we had to stay in line, of course, because we were 60 people. And as we were standing in line, the nun gives me a piece of bacon. And of course, even if I wanted to eat it, I wouldn't in front of my friend, whose uncle is this Sapinker rabbi. So I says to the nun, no, thank you. And he tells me in Hungarian, just take it. If you won't eat it, I'll eat it. I was very surprised to hear it. And I was still very, very religious. My father was a rabbi also. So I was brought up very religious. So anyways, we were walking and walking, taking, if we could, we took trains, but then the train tracks were bombed, so we had to get off the train. It took us a long, long time to get to Palestine. We wound up in a displaced persons camp, and we realized it was called Fallersleben. No. Furrenwald, yes. Anyways, we realized that it's going to take a long, long time to get to Palestine, so we got married. We were the only ones in that camp because the rest of the youngsters that my husband took on the road, he left them wherever he could, to find, he found them a good place. But he took me all the way to Palestine.
This place, Christmas camp.
That the United Nations took care of us. Yeah. And the American soldiers were there, and they gave us the jackets, and they gave us a blanket because we were in jeans, men and women, but they felt that brides shouldn't wear jeans. So they gave us a blanket, and the girls in the organization sold me a blanket. The boys in the organization sold their rations of cigarettes for a month so they could buy me a piece of white material. After all, a bride should wear something white. And the girls sold me this blouse. And this is my wedding picture. January 18th, 1940.
Wow.
I mean December 18th, 1946. No.
That was yesterday.
You were born January 8th, 1947. 1946. January 18th. Yesterday would have been 77 years.
Wow.
Right?
While we're doing pictures, this is a picture. You're welcome to look at them, you know, after it's done. But this is Max Lieber, our liberator. There's no way to thank the liberators of the camps. I mean, most of them could not talk about what they saw because it was so awful. I mean, it's like looking into Dante's Inferno. But Max was there. He was a driver for Patton. He was German-born. His parents did not like the politics in Germany and where it was going. So when Max was a child, they came to the United States, and they lived in Nebraska in a very, very German area. And Max was drafted to go fight the Nazis. Yeah, so quite an amazing, as I said before, miracles. You know what, we're talking about miracles. Tell them about Ilonka.
Okay, another miracle which is incredible. You know, when we were in the labor camp, we still had to stay in line to be counted and stay in line for our food. And one day I'm staying in line for my food. We
Such
had,
as it was.
such as it was, better than Auschwitz for sure. Anyways, I'm standing in line, and this woman, her name was Ilonka, stands in front of me. And I tell her, listen, I see that your bowl is already dirty, which means you already had your food. And she says, yes, but I'm still hungry. And we are arguing in Hungarian back and forth till a Nazi came. She didn't know what we were arguing about, but she beat me up merciless. This is okay. We walk in, and I holler, Branya. And my husband hollers, Branya. She lived in the same town that he was he was brought up. And I was hollering Hanya because she saved my life. So miracles really do happen. Yeah.
So, just, I don't know, I have no concept of time. So let me know if we're running over. But so my mother is a part of history, right? Doesn't end there. My parents get to Jerusalem, and there was a war going on there too. They get there and they're looking at the lights of Haifa, which is the port city of Israel, after this enormous journey that took almost a year, and they're in the port of Haifa, and the British came and turned them away. They said, you cannot enter. The British, Palestine belonged to the British, and they were turning away the refugees that were coming in from Europe because the Arabs didn't want them there, and the British wanted the Arab oil. So for a change, it was political. But they sent all these Jews, first of all, in order to get them off the ship onto another ship, they had to tear gas them. Yeah, they were tear gassed to get off that ship to go on another ship, which took them to Cyprus, and yet again they were confined with barbed wire. Not electrified, but barbed wire.
We were there for 6 months. Again, very little food. Not like in Nazi Germany, but it was not much food. Rations. They gave out rations. I had a little more food because I was pregnant and I wasn't 18 yet. So I had a little more food, so I was able to share. They made us build tents in 3 couples in 1 tent. So I shared my extra food with the 3 couples. We were there for 6 months until finally the British decided to take 50 people at a time, once a month, towards Israel, towards Palestine. So I was among my husband and I were among the first ones because I was pregnant and I wasn't 18 yet. So we got finally to Israel. 2 weeks later, Rachel was born. Anyways, we were very happy, of course. We were finally in Israel. And
You know, Mom, before you go on with the Israel story, would you mind telling them in, what was the displaced persons camp was,
in Fernbahn,
Fernbahn.
yeah,
Is that where you found out you were pregnant?
yeah.
Okay. Go ahead. It's
You
your
know,
story.
I was so naive even then. In Europe, you didn't know the facts of life until you got married. That's when your mom took you to her bedroom and told you the facts of life.
Today, a 5-year-old.
Anyways, but I had no mom by then. So 3 months after I got married, there was a young woman next door that got a bicycle. I don't know how, but when I saw it, I asked her to loan it to me because I wanted to show off my new husband that I know how to ride a bicycle. So I get on the bicycle and I hollered, Joe, look. And as I hollering, I fell down and I broke my knees. And they took me to the infirmary, of course. And the nurses says, are you pregnant? Pregnant? I didn't understand because they spoke German. So they had a Hungarian doctor upstairs, and they took me to him, and he says, "You are pregnant, right? Because I threw up downstairs." And I says, "Why?" He takes a look at my finger and he says, a gold wedding band which the United Nations gave us. In 1940, we got to Palestine end of 46. In 1948 is when the United Nations declared nation of Israel. Next day, my husband and 3 of his brothers went into the army right away, and one of his brothers died. My father-in-law, who was already in Toledo, Ohio, sent us such sad letters. How hard it is to lose a child, which I understand now. I lost 2 children the past 2 years. So I understand now what he meant. And after a little while, my husband said, "Well, Esther, we have to go." My father insists. So we started going towards the United States, but we couldn't get a visa right away. We spent 6 months in France, and then 6 years in Canada. Then finally, in 1958, we got the American visa. And I am very, very proud to be an American citizen now.
My mother, however, that naive streak in you. Want to tell them about your doctor after? I should tell them? So now, 6 years after me, came my sister Franny, and 15 months later, my brother Mark. So she thought she couldn't have any kids because after me, they were trying and there were no children. So, and then all of a sudden there was one year and one the following year. So she goes to the doctor and she says to the doctor, "What do I do? We really can't afford any more children." And the doctor